And we kick off this evening with a look at the cinema.
I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
It's beautiful, beautiful cinema.
Cinema history come to life.
I found my solace in the small cinema I went to every Thursday night.
I'm a professor of cinema.
I go to the cinema for the stories.
There was no competition between the cinema and seminar.
I mean, it's not within the realm of conventional cinema.
And now,
here's Space and Johnson
with a cinema review.
It is Monday, August 17th, 2026, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Cinemaster's Reviews. I'm your host, based in the Cinemaster Johnson. We have an exciting show this week. I just realized I should fix that banner right now. Welcome, everybody. If you want to like and subscribe to this video, I tell you at the end of the video, but if you want to do that right now, we appreciate it a lot. But yes, thank you all for joining. We are going to be reviewing at the end of Oak Street as well as The Wrong Girls. I say we jump right into our show, started with our first review of the night, that being The End of Oak Street. This is the third film directed by David Robert Mitchell. You might recognize that name as the director of It Follows, probably his most popular film, a horror movie from about 10 years ago at this point, as well as Under the Silver Lake, a ode to mystery noir films. Starring Andrew Garfield, that came out, I believe, in 2019, and he hasn't made a movie since that film, but he is back at it with The End of Oak Street. This film follows the Platt family, led by Greg Platt, played by Ewan McGregor, and Denise Platt, played by Anne Hathaway. They have two children, Audrey and Brian, and they just seem like your typical suburban run-of-the-mill family. Movie takes place in 1982, so we open up on them. They are at a block party, a neighborhood block party, essentially a lot of games going on, water balloon throwing contests, potato sack races. A lot of fun stuff is going on, but one night, in the middle of the night, everything seems okay. All the characters go to bed, and they wake up, and wouldn't you know it, they see their whole neighborhood seems to have essentially teleported into a land where dinosaurs still roam the earth. It is now up to the Platt family to try and survive long enough to hopefully find a way to figure out what happened, why they essentially seem to have time traveled to a different time period, and how they can get their neighborhood back to safety. David Robert Mitchell is a director. I haven't seen Under the Silver Lake. I really want to. It seems like a movie I would really like. But I really liked It Follows, and I've been hearing a lot about this movie. It's produced by J.J. Abrams, and it definitely has that Super 8 feel of it feels like an ode to old 80s family movies. And watching this film, I can definitely say this is, even though I did really, really enjoy The End of Oak Street, this is going to be one of the more divisive movies of the year, simply because it is going for a feel and a tone that is so unlike what we normally get. I tend to be really into that, really hokey, sort of hopeful, almost in a way campy nature that all the characters seem to be acting in this way. Very on the nose dialogue that I really enjoyed, and it really seems to be very, very much focused on the adventure of watching these characters survive these dinosaurs. At the same time, I just need to get the caveat out of the way that this is going to be a very polarizing movie, because I can't deny that a lot of the dialogue in this movie is very cheesy. A lot of the performances feel like characters aren't acting the way characters normally act. It honestly at times felt like I was watching a Shyamalan movie with how all the characters were reacting to everything around them, where not everything quite seems the way a normal person would react. But I really like that feeling for a sci-fi film, for a film that puts me in another world. And I really like how David Robert Mitchell just sort of asked the audience, hey, if you're not going to get on board with this tone, you're probably not going to like this movie. But if you are, you're going to have a heck of a good time along if you are willing to go along for the ride. As I said, it captures the feeling of an Amblin science fiction film really, really well. This reminded me, in a lot of ways of E.T. If instead of if in E.T. if instead of was if instead of a 3-foot little brown alien, if it was just these giant feathery dinosaurs that want to do nothing but just eat all the humans around them. And obviously, it feels much scarier than E.T. Honestly, it feels like if in Gremlins, if the Gremlins were giant, like really the only thing that makes the Mogwais not the scariest thing in Gremlins is the fact they are just like a foot tall. So if everyone sort of like rallies around them, they can stop the Mogwais. Going to be very hard to stop the dinosaurs in this movie, and you get a lot of good sense of scale in this film as to how big and how terrifying all these prehistoric creatures are. And I really like how David Robert Mitchell, even though the dinosaurs are very scary in this movie, it never loses that sense of adventure, that sense of wonder that I think is missing from a lot of blockbusters nowadays. Like, I think my big takeaway from The End of Oak Street is there are so many movies that even when like the characters are, even when they are trying to like envelop a sense of fun or envelop a sense of like good nature adventure, it often just finds itself taking itself a little too seriously. I think the fun part about The End of Oak Street is there are so many times when the movie does sort of realize like, hey, at the end of the day, this is a movie where these characters just sort of woke up one day in prehistoric times. There is something a little bit obscene to that, and the movie treats it that way. And with that, I had a lot of fun. There's this really great scene where Denise and Greg are just sort of like scouting the neighborhood and see if it's like if it's safe. And they run into two brachiosauri who are, I'll just say, mating on top of a gas station. And the movie just sort of takes a sense to just be like, that is hilarious that is actually happening. And it got a huge laugh out of the audience. And then I won't spoil what happens after, but at the same time, it immediately goes to a really shocking and really violent scene. This movie is PG-13. It feels like it's really pushing the edge of how much violence can be in a PG-13 movie. And I really, really enjoyed that. As I said, it really does remind you that, like, hey, dinosaurs should be really cool and they should be really scary. And it feels like the characters in this movie are dealing with giant human-killing monsters in this film, specifically with the carnivorous dinosaurs. I believe the first dinosaur we run into is a velociraptor, and this raptor isn't, like, immediately trying to kill our main characters. But the second they clock that, oh, there are some humans around, it just slowly starts like jogging towards the characters. And it's not jogging like extremely fast, but you get the sense that like the second that dinosaur reaches a human, it is going to be bad news. And we see what these dinosaurs have the ability to do to our characters, which constantly makes us like fear for all of our characters' lives, because the movie has no issue killing any character within the blink of an eye. And I like those sense of stakes of just like, even though I was never truly like panicking in this movie, wondering what was going to happen, I genuinely did feel a sense of danger for our characters, which is fun for a big studio blockbuster like this. The CGI for the dinosaurs looks really, really good. If you've heard my complaint about the Jurassic World movies of the past, specifically of the 21st century, I think all the dinosaurs look very dull. They all have the same like gray designs. The CGI doesn't look all that great. For a movie with only like an $80 million budget, I believe, I never had the sense of like, what I'm looking at are just fake rendered dinosaurs. Like obviously I knew the dinosaurs weren't real. They're not using models, but I do think the filmmakers took a lot of time to really hone the idea and hone the craft of these creatures to make them look real enough. Honestly, the only animal that looks kind of fake is the dog in this movie. There are certain scenes where the dog is put in perilous situations where it's just getting flinged around, and you can very clearly tell the dog is CGI. That was a little aggravating. Honestly, the stuff with the dog felt a little like, that was sort of where my like tolerance for the hokiness of this film was pushed a little bit to the extreme with stuff like the dog and just with certain other things. But I thought the dinosaurs looked really, really, really excellent. And there is one scene in this film where it's not even with a dinosaur. It's just with a giant snake that's just slithering through a house and a character is not aware of it. And when you get a sense of that snake's mouth, I just about peed myself with how scary it was. I think the scares, I think the like really thrilling and chilling moments of this film are handled very, very well. I really enjoy that, like, as you're going through the movie, you keep on thinking, like, are we going to be getting an explanation as to why all these characters one day woke up and their neighborhood is just in the middle of a dinosaur jungle? It kind of explains it, but doesn't like feel like it needs to take the moment to have like a 5-minute exposition scene for you to understand what's going on. It knows why you're here. You want to see these characters, see if they can escape this situation, and that is what it is focused on. If I were to say some of the negatives of the film, when we first open up on the Platt family, we see that Denise and Greg's marriage is failing, and we see that they're sort of only really keeping it together as a front for their kids, so that way their kids don't get too depressed at the idea of their marriage failing. We see that Greg has gotten fired from his job, so he's taken up a secret pizza delivery job, so that way his wife doesn't know that he's gotten laid off. We see that his wife is a struggling writer who is trying to put like details of her marriage in the books. We see that their son is hiding the fact that he snapped back at a bully and ended up breaking his bully's arm. The daughter is secretly in love with the neighbor from next door, who the brother is also in love with, and no one can really tell you that. Everything with like the human drama, I'm not going to pretend like it's not cliched, and I'm not going to pretend like you haven't seen it before, but I feel like the film knows that and is kind of playing into that, and almost feels like a bit of it's playing up the genre a little, and I really enjoyed how it did that for the most part. I will admit there are some parts where I think I can't really excuse it. For example, the kid that does play Brian, the son of the Platt family, I think is giving a very over-the-top performance, unfortunately. So over-the-top where I don't think I can really excuse the fact that, oh, he's just a kid, or they're... Actually, I can excuse that he is just a kid, but I can't just say, like, oh, they're going for a specific tone, because there are some very grating scenes where he is, like, trying to explain to this girl that he does like her, and it really does feel like it comes off kind of grating. But that was really the only, like, tonal issue I had. Honestly, I would have, like, genuinely adored this film. Like, this would be like a top 5 favorite movie of the year if it wasn't for the fact that I think the ending completely dropped the ball. Without spoiling how we get what happens at the ending, it feels like we are sort of going towards a much darker situation, a much darker conclusion that the film is going to let on. I'm not necessarily saying like everyone is going to die, but there are going to be some stakes to the situation. And I think the film, it feels like the studio came in and told David Robert Mitchell, hey, you need to add a last-minute decision by the characters to not make the ending as pessimistic as it does, which weirdly, in my opinion, I think only makes the ending feel a little bit more pessimistic and makes me doubt the motivations of certain characters a little bit more. And that just makes the ending feel like really deflating in a way, because it feels like... from what we felt like, it feels like the film didn't have faith in the audience to get behind what the characters do and their journey throughout the film, and it need to put a very obvious button on it that did come off, and I did feel a bit aggravated watching it towards the end. But one more positive I do need to say on this film, because I do want to end this on a positive. Maybe my score of the year from Michael Giacchino. I think the music of this film captures like the wonder of E.T. with like the grand scale of the Jurassic Park score so well. It is the best John Williams score that was not composed by John Williams, and how he just like puts you in this lighthearted fantasy score up against some of the most like scary set pieces from a blockbuster I've ever seen. It is used so well, and how David Robert Mitchell is able to like mix the music with the action should really be evaluated in a really great way. It Follows had a great score as well, so it's fun to see that all of his movies tend to use music very well. If I were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, 0 being awful, 10 being amazing, I'm going to give it a flat 8 out of 10. I think this is a very good movie. I think with just a few different changes, this could easily go up to a 9 for me and could be one of my favorite films. But as it is, I do think this is a really great original film. We don't get too many of those. So it's always fun when I can really champion films like this. If you have the time, please go see this in theaters. It looks great on a big screen. All of the action is excellent. Anne Hathaway is amazing. Anne Hathaway is having such a great year, and this is another great performance in her bootstraps this year. Ewan McGregor is also very good, but Anne Hathaway is, I think, the one that really knows the type of movie she's in. There's a scene where she just like blasts a T-Rex with a shotgun, and it's amazing. But yeah, End of Oak Street gets a big thumbs up from me. But I say we head right into our second review of the night, that being The Wrong Girls. This is directed by Dylan Meyer, the wife, I believe, of Kristen Stewart, if I'm not mistaken. This follows two roommates by the name of Frankie and, what's Aaliyah Shocker? Frankie and Molly. They are two slacker stoners who have sort of just gotten by, enjoying life to the most, like sort of like super, like just sort of like light-hearted nature in the best way they can. And one night at a party, there is a lookalike of Frankie's that was supposed to take a briefcase, but Frankie ends up getting it. When Frankie and Molly take it home, they realize this briefcase contains a large shipment of extreme psychedelic drugs as they are on the precipice of not being able to pay rent. They decide after taking some of the drugs that they are going to try and sell the rest in order to get money to pay their rent. And while they're doing this, they are chased down by many people on many different sides. Some of the criminals that end up stealing the drugs, some of the scientists that ended up making the drugs. There's a lot of plot in this movie, and unfortunately, it doesn't really all come together all that well. I think the movie knows what it wants to be, even though it's adding all these different plot elements of these two characters that are trying to pay their rent, and the scientists that are trying to use it for science breakthroughs, and the criminals that are going to sell it on the black market. And do the drugs end up giving you like superpowers, which come into the third act, for example? But I just don't think it succeeds all that well, because for a movie that is primarily focused on being funny, because yes, there are crime elements in this movie, it's primarily a comedy. I just don't think it ends up being all that funny. I will say Kristen Stewart and Aaliyah Shawkat have a lot of great chemistry. I think their dynamic as friends works really well. Frankie is easily the character who's like the sort of the bigger like screw up in a way, where she went to we learned that Frankie went to Stanford, but she dropped out because she just didn't really want to deal with the responsibilities, and she's just been coasting knowing that she has her best friend. But Molly might be wanting to move out because she sort of has she has this boyfriend that wants her to move in, and the boyfriend is just sort of like comically perfect to a way where you think there's going to be a twist where he ends up being evil, and I guess this is a spoiler. He doesn't end up being evil, and I think that's kind of sweet. This guy just loves this stoner so much and wants to be there for her, and is just so positive in every single aspect of his life that is just sort of comically like something's up about this guy, but nothing ends up happening, and that character is actually really entertaining. But their sort of dynamic as these two friends that love each other, but one of them starting to break away a little. They try to hold up the script probably to the best of their ability. I just don't think they have the talent to really take something this undercooked and make the most of it. But yeah, in terms of the script, I think the worst part about the comedy of this film is just it feels way too slow for the type of storyline that it is that's trying to tell. So much of the humor of this movie comes from the characters' like inner high monologues, where both Frankie and Molly will be like high out of their minds, and they'll keep like cutting into their head and just them having like secret conversations. And every time that happens, it feels like the movie just stops dead and just goes to a snail's pace just for these characters to like sort of like spout these one-liners in their head to each other, just essentially to themselves. And it would be better if these moments were funnier, but they really just aren't. And when those types of scenes aren't that funny, it really makes the movie feel like it's dragging. Which is what these scenes genuinely feel like. Movie has a big supporting cast, and most of the supporting performances aren't all that special. Honestly, I don't want to like negatively shout anyone out, but Kate McKinnon plays Dr. Olson, who is essentially like the creator of these drugs. and she feels like she is in a completely different movie. Outside of like the supernatural elements, this movie doesn't really feel like it's like set in like a different universe. She seems like she is playing like this like Dutch cartoon scientist, talks in this very thick accent, and honestly, every single time we keep cutting back to her, I just felt annoyed because she seems like she is just in her own film and doing her own types of bits, and those bits just do not fit with the type of film that I think we were getting. Tony Hale's in this movie, Gina Davis is in this movie. They're fine. One supporting performance I do think is actually pretty good is Lakeith Stanfield plays like the assistant to Dr. Olsen. His name is not Metalhead Dave, because the first time Frankie meets this guy at a club, he's wearing like this big wig and these big sunglasses to essentially be in disguise, and then he takes it off and he's essentially just this like regular professional bodyguard. And it's so fun to see Lakeith Stanfield playing essentially the straight man in this comedy, the one who is just sort of like witnessing like, okay, both Molly and Frankie are just such hot messes, but I'm just going to do my job because I am working for Dr. Olsen, and as long as I get paid, everything's going to be all right with me. Those scenes are really funny, and Lakeith Stanfield is able to play like over it so well. Probably the least funny parts of this movie, when Molly and Frankie end up getting high, they end up being able to talk with their cats. One of their cats is voiced by Kumail Nanjiani. The other cat is voiced by Seth Rogen. And they end up probably saying like half the dialogue in this movie because we're just here because Frankie and Molly just end up taking these cats every single place they go. And every time these characters talk, like I could look past a lot of this stuff if it was funny, but I think the issue is this dialogue isn't that funny. The jokes there aren't that funny. I like Seth Rogen and Kumail Nanjiani as actors, but when you're not giving them very funny stuff to say, it really just makes this film that isn't that long. It's like an hour, 45 minutes. It feels like it's like 2.5 hours with how just overstuffed this plot is and how just like most of the humor is just characters just sort of like riffing off each other. Not even riffing off each other, because most of the jokes are in each other's heads, and they're just sort of like giving one-liners to each other, and it just doesn't really come off all that funny. It feels really poorly paced, and while the two lead actors are doing enough to make this film to keep this film from being unwatchable, it really does feel grating at points. If I were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, I'm going to give this a 5 out of 10. I thought this was a really mediocre comedy. Kristen Stewart and Alia Shawkat are doing the best they can, but this film needed another rewrite or another pass in the editing room, because it is a rough watch at points. I would not recommend seeing this in theaters. If you really do love Kristen Stewart as an actress, like I do, maybe see it on streaming because she does have some funny moments. But for the most part, I would recommend you should probably stay away from this film. But that just about does it for our show tonight. Thank you for watching. Remember to like this video and subscribe to the video store. It helps grow our channel a lot. Next week is going to be a big week. I'm going to be reviewing Tony, directed by Matt Johnson, the biopic about Anthony Bourdain, as well as Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma, one of my most anticipated films of the year. Jane Schoenberg is proving themselves to be one of the most interesting filmmakers working right now. Super excited to talk about both those movies next week. And until next time, watch more films.
And the award for most vapid film review of the century goes to...
Okay, movie review. Okay, I thought it was beauty.
And he's now in cinema hell, where one day we'll all be reunited.
This is me at the Regal Cinema crying as I did through much of the film.